Sometimes, to do what's right, we must be steady and give up the thing we desire the most, even our dreams. Welcome to Film Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, welcome to Film Talk. I'm very excited actually about this episode. I know it doesn't seem like it, but there's just a lot that I want to talk about. There's a lot of philosophical discussion that I think can spur from this particular film. So before we get into that, Hunter, my good friend, how are you doing today? How was church last night? How'd that go?
Really well. Went to a ward Christmas party. Um, Santa was there, and we had a hot chocolate
Ooh.
bar and carrot. Good time. And right before that, I got to watch Free Guy for the first time. It was absolutely amazing. Loved it. It was my most anticipated movie of 2021, and it met my expectations and exceeded them so much.
Dude, that is awesome. I haven't actually got to see it yet, but I've been hearing so much good about it. So knowing that you loved it makes me even more excited for that film.
All right. So, let's get into a brief recap of Spider-Man 2 from 2004.
All right.
Which is going to be really hard because there's a lot that happens in this
Oh
movie.
my gosh, there is a
There's so
lot.
much. There's a reason that. Oh gosh. Sorry, you're probably gonna have to cut this out. Um,
It's all good.
it's only 2 hours and 7 minutes. Okay, never mind. I was about to say there's a reason this movie is 2 hours long. It's 2.5 hours long. No, no. Anyway,
Oh, no, it's almost 3 hours with commercials. That's what threw me.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, we've both been watching like a TV version of this movie, and so there's like 5 straight minutes of commercials about every 10-ish minutes. Makes it honestly a little bit more of a chore to get through. And it felt like I was consuming content and trying to finish the movie instead of trying to experience the movie,
Right.
which is a very different experience that I have most of the time when I watch a movie. With even these movies that I've been watching on TV. Anyway, point is, that is going to color how I talk about the movie this time.
Right.
Um, but to be brief and to condense a lot of things into a single thing, Peter is having trouble balance of his life, whether it's work. I think he's running 3 different jobs in this movie, maybe just
Or
two.
in the
Uh,
beginning of the movie, technically.
yeah. Whether it's work or family relationships or romance or any social obligations whatsoever. Not to mention trying to be Spider-Man. This is a
Yeah.
ridiculously relatable premise. I feel like everybody has gone through that experience of trying to balance all the aspects of their life at some point. Right now in this movie, he has no idea how to do that. He is everything is falling apart. He is missing everything. No one thing is getting enough. Everything is getting too little from trying to balance and failing to balance.
Me
Along
right
the
now.
way, um, I know that feeling. Along the way, a not evil scientist turns evil when his experiment goes terribly wrong and he becomes Doc Ock and decides to rebuild his nuclear fusion device, which could destroy the city. And along the way, presumably because Peter is having so much trouble, but I'm not going to say presumably because. Also along the way, Peter loses his powers temporarily and like sketchily. He mostly loses the ability to web sling. Wall crawling seems to be pretty safe for most of the movie until finally he has to give up the Spider-Man persona forever and then come back to the persona once he's gotten his life steady and back together again.
Right, right.
I feel like that covers everything. It was still way longer than I actually wanted it to be, partly because I was rambling for half of it.
Right. Oh, no, no, trust me. There is no amount of length that you can go to or a detail that you can go into that can explain the entirety of this plot in under a minute. There's just so much in this film.
Okay,
And as
okay.
I.
In that
Oh,
case, let me try again.
okay.
This is a movie about Peter trying and failing to balance his social life. All right, this is a movie about Peter trying and failing to balance the aspects of his life um, under the threat of a new villain, Doc Ock. There we go.
That
One
works.
sentence description of it.
That works. All right. We're keeping all that in, by the way, just so that the people at home know what goes into podcasting. Normally, we'd cut all that
Uh,
out and cut to the half a second one, but you know, it be what it be. Anyway, so at the top of the episode, I brought up the fact that this is a very philosophically heavy movie, and there are plenty of things that I could start off with. But first, I have to say this. I have to get this off my chest. Mary Jane is not a good person in this film. She is not a good person. Not only, and this is all like, within camera, did she attempt to cheat on her fiance with Peter while the camera focused in on her engagement ring, but she left him at the altar to go to Peter and did not change out of her wedding dress. Like, if anybody else had done that except for Mary Jane Watson, we would have all been in an uproar, and everyone in the rightfully so. Like, at least those two aspects, I was like, I hope this is intentional, but I don't think it was because I think they wanted us to root for her and Peter, but I didn't. I was just like, that poor guy. She left him at the altar. It's like, oh, I know what they were trying to go for. Like, Peter and MJ are soulmates, but at the same time, it's just MJ is not a good person for that.
this goes back to a lot of what we were discussing with Spider-Man 1 about how these movies are live-action cartoons with very 80s sensibilities.
Right.
Part of it is that, remember, this movie came out 5 years after The Runaway Bride. I don't actually know what that has to do with anything. I was about
I've
to
never seen it. I haven't even heard of
this
it.
movie The Runaway Bride, but like I haven't actually seen Runaway Bride, so I shouldn't make that comparison. Anyway, so this goes back to what we were talking about last time about this movie, about these movies being live action cartoons with 80s sensibilities where iconography and visual communication is everything. Because if you take it from a Thermian perspective, that these are accurate historical documents of fictional events, that the creators are enslaved to what happened in the universe, and that there is a universe at all for things to happen, then yeah, every character in these movies are terrible people. In the first movie, Peter's a bad person. In the
Oh,
second movie, Mary
agreed.
Jane is a bad person. Aunt May in the third movie does some like really weird, sketchy stuff with her relationship with Peter. Harry just like makes some really stupid choices.
Oh my
Flash is just
gosh.
what? Flash, what are you doing? Like Flash, sir, you are the size of a giant. What are you even doing in this school? But then, if you take the opposite perspective, these movies are intended to communicate visually to the audience, not that there is no universe. There is no Mary Jane. That Mary Jane can't be a bad person. She doesn't exist. But like, yeah, the point is she is not a role model. Please do not watch this movie and think that this is how love is supposed to work.
Oh, right, right. I mean, the least she could have done was gone to the altar, and then when the priest said, "Do we have any objections?" provided an objection. Because at least then she gives her fiance the respect
Some
he
closure.
deserves for having gone through all of this, and then just to be left at the. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Um.
But this is Sam Raimi. The
Oh.
goal is not to have role models. The goal is to be like seriously, knowing that Sam Raimi made these movies is like absolutely essential to at least to my understanding of how these movies work.
Right.
If I didn't know Sam Raimi made these movies, I would be watching them with a completely different perspective. And honestly, I might straight up hate these movies. But knowing it was Sam Raimi, I'm like, oh, I get what you're going for, and I love what you're going for.
Right. Well, like I haven't seen any of Sam Raimi's other films, so I don't know his artistic style. And I love these first two films that we've seen. However, like of this second film, that, like the whole Mary Jane thing, and then I have one other non-issue, I guess, with the film. It's just something I would have done differently if I was directing it. But honestly, this film so far is the better of the two, and it's no wonder why everyone thinks this is the best film in the trilogy. I I loved this movie so much. But on the Sam Raimi thing, I don't know. I kind of have to disagree with your thoughts on Sam Raimi only doing it, like only directing for the spectacle and stuff. Like that could that's probably the case. I'm probably wrong. However, the way that I see it, if you're only directing for the spectacle, why would you put so much thought into the dialogue, into the character development, into the plot even? Like this movie, the plot is rock solid. I have not been able to find anything wrong with this plot, and I've been thinking about it all day. The characters, while there's some wonky dialogue, that's to be expected in a comic book superhero movie. And the character arcs outside of MJ, they make sense. And even with MJ, it makes sense, even though she's not a great person in the end. So I don't think that he's solely going for spectacle. I think spectacle's a big part of it, but he is such a talented director that he's able to achieve that spectacle along with really good characters and really a really good story. And Doc Ock is a perfect example of that, taking this guy who is a really like a he's mostly like a humble scientist with a tinge of self-indulgence, a tinge of ego, and that little amount of ego is what spiraled his entire character into what he became by the end of the film. But then all that other humanity that he had left is what brought him back in enough time to save the world. I think it's a really, really well done character arc there.
I would still kind of love to see this version of Doc Ock as Superior Spider-Man.
Yes.
Now, I should clarify, it would miss so much of the fun of Superior Spider-Man.
Oh,
So
I
much of the fun of
agree.
that run is Doc Ock being just like so over the top evil. Like he sounds like a Bond villain. He talks like the kind of guy that Megamind aspires to be. Like, sure, it would take out that part of it, but I feel like of Doc Ock would have a great character arc if you gave him a Superior Spider-Man run.
Right.
For anybody who's like, okay, we've been talking a lot about Sam Raimi. What should I know him for? The Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, these Spider-Man movies, Drag Me to Hell, Oz the Great and Powerful, and the upcoming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. He's made other movies, but those are the ones you probably know him for.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those films except these two, and then the inevitable Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Because I'm not a big fan of like that, like his style, because he's more like of a horror style director from what I've seen. Than because I don't like horror films, so I just really haven't had a chance to like see any of his movies because I don't like those kinds of movies. But and then like as I said, I am probably wrong about his directing style, but he's definitely somebody who cares at least enough about the story to craft one of the greatest stories, at least put together wise, in superhero media history. Now, it's not the greatest as in terms of stakes or in character growth or whatnot, but in terms of the writing, it's one of the best.
So on that topic, I think it is useful to say that this movie might be the pinnacle of the superhero, the peak of the superhero renaissance. Like, think of the kind of movies that we were getting during the superhero renaissance. The Spider-Man movies, the X-Men movies, the Fantastic Four movies. Everything post-2004 feels kind of different than everything 2004 and up. And Spider-Man 2 feels like it's kind of the peak of the entire artistic movement, and it's kind of just like never gonna get better than this by way of the Renaissance. I do
Right.
think that the film has had some things that are just like absolute gold, absolute
Oh,
gold, and I'm
absolutely.
so grateful. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, it's all
Yeah,
good.
I don't feel like it's a hot take though. Say this superhero renaissance. It was also the dead center of the superhero
Right.
renaissance.
Right.
Considering it started in oh gosh, considering it started in July of 2000 and ended in March of 2008, 2004 is the dead. As for Sam Raimi and the storytelling, I am not trying to diss Sam Raimi's storytelling abilities whatsoever.
Okay.
I do want to point out he is not a writer on this movie. He is not credited. He's not given any writing credit
Ah.
for this movie.
Okay. So that
Alan Sargent.
is interesting.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
writer Alan Sargent, who you might also know for the 2012 Amazing Spider-Man and for What About Bob.
Hmm. Okay.
I don't really know him for anything else, but like he wrote Paper Moon.
I don't
I
know
know a
what
lot
that
of people
is.
know Paper Moon. Um, or Ordinary People from 1980. Again, these are like big classic movies that I know a lot of people know about. I just haven't seen. Sorry. Point is, it is entirely possible that Sam Raimi saw the script, said yes, yes, and just got out of the. It is also possible that Sam Raimi was extremely collaborative with Alan Sargent on the script and just didn't get writing credit. I don't know.
Hmm. Right. And even
Um,
even if that is the case, like he was collaborative and he didn't like get a writing credit, or even if he like stood back, it doesn't really detract from like my previous statement in too much of a way, because at least that means like he saw the script and he trusted his writer enough to make a compelling script. Because like I didn't know that he didn't write this movie, so now that I know that, it could kind of alter how I look at it. Not by much though, because he still had to sign off on the finished script and he had to go through and shoot the film. He's a brilliant cinematographer, like director, cinematographer, that type of stuff. Um, but the fact that the story was coherent and the visuals were good is an indication that not only is he able to bring on talented writers, but he's also lets them do their thing. And I don't know, maybe tweaked it a little bit during filming, but that's actually like amazing. The fact that the director, because normally on films I've seen, the director is always a writer or one of the co-writers if it's like a team. Normally, most of the time, from what I've seen. So to see the director be completely disconnected from the writing, if that is the case, that is just it goes to show how much trust he had in his staff, which just is amazing.
on the topic of the cinematography was done by Bill Pope, my favorite director of photography.
Oh
You,
yes.
you might also know him for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and Shang-Chi. Like, this
Oh.
guy is, like, top-notch cinematography. When I see Bill Pope in the opening credits, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna love this movie.
Speaking of opening credits, while we're here, I'm
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
glad. Like I loved the opening credits. I'm kind of glad we got away from the nothing but like images opening credits, and we just play the opening credits over the film now, like the story itself. That being said, these opening credits in this film were beautiful, like artist renditions of the last film, and I wouldn't trade this particular opening credit scene for anything, even though I'm glad we've gotten away from that.
I love opening credit sequences. I feel like you kind of just expect him to be like, no, no, these things are awesome.
Um,
What I mean by that,
okay,
is that like, okay, I want to give two very specific examples of opening credits and why I love opening credits.
okay,
Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and the first feature from the same director, A Fistful of Fingers, where
oh,
they just stop the movie and they just play the opening credits for about 2 straight minutes because you can really feel in those particular opening credits that this director and this producer and this editor were like, okay, there were so many people who put so much effort into this movie. I want to give them the spotlight and I want to just like stop the movie. I want to spend a few minutes to just thank them for all this work. And you can
Right.
feel so much gratitude just oozing from the opening credits, especially in A Fistful of Fingers. Jumping back to Bill Pope real quick.
Okay.
Uh, so on the topic of Bill Pope and Sam Raimi, yeah, Sam Raimi gave Bill Pope his start.
Ooh. Okay.
Entirely. Let's see. So Bill Pope started in 1983 with a bunch of music videos. After about 6 years, he made Death Doll, which is this. Oh gosh, I can't remember his name. Which is this B movie horror movie from William Dance, I think
Mm-hmm.
his name is. And horror William Dance are like, oh, that kind of movie. Um, And then his first feature after that was Darkman, Sam Raimi's first superhero movie.
Hmm.
Like, Bill Pope has been working with Sam Raimi on superhero movies for 12 years. No, almost 15 years when he started doing Spider-Man 2. Like, he and Sam Raimi had got this rhythm down at this point and really knew how to work together. Before Spider-Man 2, they'd done Darkman, Army of Darkness, and Spider-Man 1. Okay, with all that in mind, you have a lot of philosophy stuff you want to get into, and I would be happy to get into any and all of that. What do you want to talk about?
Yes. So give me just 1 second. I want to look something up real quick. Let's see. Cinematographer. I want to see. Okay. So the cinematographer on the new Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is John Matheson. John Matheson.
John Matheson is the cinematographer?
I guess that's good. I never
Oh
heard
my
his name
god!
until now. I was just checking to see if it was the guy that you were just talking about who did the Spider-Man movies
Bill
and
Pope.
Bill Pope. Thank you. I almost said Bill Pat. Um, but yeah, so John Matheson is the cinematographer for Multiverse of Madness. Let's see what his movies are. Is there anything that I would know? Gladiator is familiar. Um,
So you might recognize John Matheson for King Arthur, The Man from Uncle,
Detective
X-Men
Pikachu.
First Class, the 2010 Taron Egerton, no, wait, the 2010 Russell Crowe Robin Hood,
Hmm.
um, the Joel Schumacher Phantom of the Opera with, oh gosh, what's his name? Not Russell Crowe. Is it Russell Crowe?
I have no idea, but I just saw the film poster for Logan.
Logan? Oh,
I'm
yes, he did Logan. I forgot.
Oh,
He did
okay.
Logan.
This is
Like,
gonna be awesome because that film was beautifully shot.
John Matheson is my second favorite cinematographer. He actually might be my favorite. I'm not sure whether Bill Pope or John Matheson is my favorite. Like,
Who was the
John
cinematographer?
Matheson knows how to be extreme and formalist in weird ways that aren't like standard Sam Raimi ways. They're not like big live action, but he knows very well how to shoot for the edit. First off, like, you can tell that this man is coordinating with the editor and like, okay, how is this actually going to look in the finished movie as he's filming. And you can tell that this man is willing to be weird about the camera, but also just willing to be like very stylish and classy. I mean, the dude did Man from Uncle. This
Right.
man is fully willing to be just full class and style. He's willing to go full Western with Logan. Like, this man is a really good cinematographer.
And
I
then he goes
honestly,
completely crazy with Detective Pikachu, which was another great movie.
I completely forgot he did Detective Pikachu. Dang, I'm so much more like, the fact that John Matheson is the cinematographer makes me so much more excited for Multiverse of Madness.
Now, the last thing, real quick, I just looked up who the cinematographer for Endgame was, and it seems to be he seems to be a usual collaborator with the Russo brothers. Trent Opolo, good lord, these names are wild. Trent Opaloch, I think is how you pronounce his name, because he did Avengers Endgame, as well as Infinity War, Civil War, and The Winter Soldier. So all the Russo brothers MCU films, as well as District 9, Chappie, and it looks like a bunch of two things in 2006, which seem to be more just like smaller things. And then Ghost Recon Alpha in 2012. So he seems to be really getting up there. I mean, he did direct cinematography for one of, actually, for a while, the highest grossing movie of all time, as well as most people's favorite MCU movie, whether it's The Winter Soldier or Infinity War.
I mean, you have a point. This man has been rising within the MCU along with the Russos.
Right. I cannot
Russos.
wait to get the Russo brothers next Avengers movie because they said they're only returning for Secret Wars.
I want a secret. Like, really, the only thing that I want from the MCU at this point is Gwenpool and Secret Wars. I don't care how
Yes.
you get. I don't care how you do the X-Men. I don't care if you have Hugh Jackman. I don't care about seeing Uncle Ben in the MCU. I just want Secret Wars.
Oh, right.
And they seem like they're building up to Secret
Oh, they
Wars.
have to be. They just introduced the multiverse. Like, that has to be a thing. Like, we're going to get the Kang Wars. Then we're probably going to get some sort of Spider-Verse with the Spider-Man into Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. And then I guarantee you we're going to get Secret Wars at some point because, like, the Beyonder is freaking amazing. And if we do Secret Wars, we have to have the Beyonder so we can get God Emperor Doom. And God Emperor Doom is amazing.
I would not be at all surprised to see Kang playing an integral part in Secret Wars in the same way as Thanos played an integral part in Infinity War. I know that's not comic accurate. I could still see it working very well.
Right. I just hope that
That
they don't
said,
make him take the place of Doctor Doom, because at least in Secret Wars 2, Doctor Doom like absorbed all the powers of the Beyonder and just became God Emperor Doom, and it was an incredible story because it's Doom.
so I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but the reason why I want a Secret Wars movie is because you know what everybody's been saying about how they want Tom, Toby, and Andrew in the same movie? I want that for everybody else. Um, I want
Like,
Chris Evans as Captain America and Chris Evans as Human Torch,
ooh,
and Michael B. Jordan as Human Torch, and Michael B. Jordan as
oh,
Killmonger,
that's
all in
gonna
the
be
same movie.
insane.
Oh, I didn't say this
Oh.
was a good idea. I didn't say it had any level of
Oh no,
sanity or
it's an
any level of
amazing
reason.
idea. It's
I
just gonna
just
be insane.
absolutely want it. I also didn't say it would really, really want it.
Right.
I would love to like bring back the Roger Corman Fantastic Four from the '70s. Bring back the Thor from the '70s and the Captain America from the '70s and the Spider-Man from the '70s and the Hulk from the '70s. Have Lou Ferrigno and Ed Norton and Eric Bana and Mark Ruffalo in the same movie, all playing different Hulks.
That would be
Like just
that'd be
just go
so
as
weird.
just go as wild as you possibly can with the casting.
Here's my question though: Would you make Lou Ferrigno wear the iconic green body paint with no muscle growth, or would you put him in a mocap suit and give him a full-on Hulk transformation? Because I would say we get Eric Bana Hulk updated CGI, Mark Ruffalo Hulk good regular CGI, then Lou Ferrigno just the green body paint, and that's it. Just like in the
I actually
show.
do want that.
Because
I
then you've
want to
got
see
massive Hulk, little tiny guy. But he can still punch with the best of them.
Yes, yes, I absolutely want
Oh.
that.
One thing I want more than Secret Wars, though, is the Century. His alter ego villain, the Void. Because the Void is such an interesting character, especially with the dichotomy to the Century and the fact that as long as people remember the Century, the Void exists. The minute that everyone forgets about the Century, the Void ceases to exist. So the thing is like if the Century wants to be a superhero and wants to be remembered, then the Void will always be coming for him, and it will consume everything in its path. So the only way to save the world is to stop doing what he loves and stop being, remembered. But at the same
That
time,
sounds like it would have an absolutely fascinating take on legacy.
exactly. And I think it would be a very good, it'd be a very philosophical story, like what the Eternals was trying to be. And I just think it'd be really interesting to see how they depict the void. Um, but on philosophy, we should probably get back to Spider-Man 2 now.
Especially on the topic of up what you love in order to save everybody else. So,
Oh yeah,
tell
right.
me about the philosophy that you love from this movie.
So within this film, okay, so there's a lot of like philosophical talking points in this. Honestly, I have forgotten a couple of them because it's been a day since I've seen it, and there's just so much to dissect. But you have the philosophy of like overworking yourself. Do, is there is there too much, or if you have to, like can you overwork yourself doing the things that need to be done? So we see in the film Peter loses his powers, and it's presumed to be because of his stress, because he is like struggling with the fact that he can't have a relationship with MJ. He and Harry, their friendship is deteriorating, and he still has all the guilt of Uncle Ben's death on his mind. And so that, as well as losing his job at the pizza place, losing, almost flunking out of Dr. Connor's class, and like all of this stuff with the stress of being Spider-Man, it all culminates on him losing his powers, which Matt Pat I think correctly pointed out in one of his videos that it's more of like a psychological thing than a physical thing. Like he didn't lose his powers; it's just his brain shut the powers off so he couldn't use them as a way to allow him to cope with everything that's happened and to, you know, like get control of his life again. But during that, he takes and he thinks like, okay, I don't have my powers now. I no longer have to do anything that I used to do. Spider-Man is no more. And that's where what's interesting comes into play, and something we've talked about in the past is, can you give up on destiny? Or will destiny always come? If you are Spider-Man and you will always be Spider-Man, and that is like that is your responsibility and your destiny, if you gave up that mantle, how long will it be until things start to fall apart for you? Because we see in this film, like Peter Parker gives up the mantle, and his relationship with MJ starts to collapse. And he tells Aunt May about the thing, about what happened with Uncle Ben, and Aunt May gets really upset, and he feels like he's breaking his relationship with Aunt May. Then at the same time, him at like the whole Doc Ock situation is going down, and Peter realizes like during this whole thing, like sometimes even I I might want something so badly, but there are some things I can't have, especially when you have the responsibility of being Spider-Man. And that's I think where sometimes destiny and like what you are meant to do will come for you, and it will find you when it needs you the most and when you are needed the most. Like you can have the time off, but when it's time to act, you better be ready. And it's a weird thing because it's got talking points on both sides of where there, because Peter, once he lost the powers and he started just doing himself and bettering himself, he was happy. But once he realized like he is Spider-Man and he has to take on his mantle, he found peace in that as well. And so there's a really interesting balance that I think this film is telling us we have to find within ourselves between who we are now, and who we're meant to be, and who we need to be, especially if you're someone like Spider-Man. And I find it really interesting because
This is a big
go ahead.
this is a big part of who Peter is in the comics. I'm not gonna say it's the only thing he is in the comics. I'm not gonna say that every comic is about this, but like it's very the phrase "Am I not supposed to have what I want? Am I not supposed to be happy?" is like a very Peter comic accurate thing to
Right.
say. And because of that, look, we talk a lot about Batman's trauma. We talk a lot about Batman's mental health issues and his lack of balance and how, like, dude needs a therapist.
Oh, definitely. The night
We
isn't
should
therapy enough.
we should have the same conversation about Peter to the same extent and to the same amount. We should be
Right.
talking as much about mental health with Peter Parker as we do about Bruce Wayne.
Exactly. And because as Peter says like in the film, sometimes to do what's right, we need to be steady and give up the things we desire the most, even our dreams. And that hits really close to home for me because for a long time I have been like not happy. I've been depressed. I found a while ago there if I just give up a whole bunch of things, it makes me happy. But at the same time, if I give up those things, that it's not right. Like the right thing to do is to push forward. And for me, it's to trust God. For some people, it might be to focus on their studies. But sometimes to do what is right, especially when you're a religious person in the eyes of whatever God you serve, you have to be steady and be willing to give up those things that you want so badly because it might not be right and it might not be for you or it might not be yet. There's a verse in the Bible. I'll put it up on screen if I can remember. But the verse goes, "There is a time and a place for everything under the sun. It might not be now. It might not be in the next 10 years. But everything you want, there's a time and a place for it. You just have to wait. You have to be patient. You have to be steady. And wait to get to that point where you can have that thing. Because if you try to attain it at the wrong time, it could lead to terrible consequences. If somebody, let's say, is shown an image of them in power, and they attempt to find that power without the steadiness that God provides them, then they could end up causing wars that wage for thousands of years, all in the name of power, rather than waiting and getting that power later down the line in times of peace without war. And I know it's a really out of left field analogy, but it's how I've always thought of this. It's like there's a time and a place for everything. Not everything can come at once, and sometimes you have to wait for it. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on that piece?
For anybody wondering, that passage is Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verses 1 through 11.
Thank you.
I've been struggling with that idea a lot because I've mentioned before on this podcast how I was raised to be a chosen one. I was raised with a mission that I was supposed to accomplish to save the world. A couple years ago, I was like, someone else can do it. I'm not doing that because it made me absolutely miserable. I had no happiness to be found in life as long as I was trying to fulfill that mission. And watching any superhero movie, especially Spider-Man, where like a huge part of Peter's character is actively choosing to forsake any form of happiness in life in favor of doing the mission that he was given, well, at least Peter chose his mission. Like, Peter is miserable. In many of the comics, he's just so incredibly guilt-ridden. He's not driven by love. He's driven by guilt. He's driven by fear of making the same mistake again. He's driven by so many just toxic uh, traits in himself. He has an incredibly toxic relationship with Spider-Man. And it's
Yeah.
just sad. And honestly, I know this is a very, very stupid take. I wish he would just hang up the suit and go home. The only happiness we see Peter have in the entire trilogy is when he hangs up the suit.
Right.
There's one other time, and it's in Spider-Man 3, but again, it's when he's hung up the suit. Not that he hangs up the suit and decides to never be Spider-Man again, but the only happiness he finds in life is as Peter. There is no happiness to be found for him in Spider-Man, and for me, I'm fortunate and privileged that I don't have to be the only one doing this. And this is a huge part of what makes it interesting to see Peter be the only superhero in his universe.
Right.
Where and they weren't going to introduce characters like Miles Morales or Spider-Gwen, because I don't think Miles Morales existed or Spider-Gwen existed back then.
I actually think they came out in 2004, but I'm not 100% sure. Let me fact check that.
Uh, Miles Morales was introduced in 2011. Miles
Oh,
Morales.
so not 2004.
Oh yeah, like Miles Morales is ridiculous new. And Spider Gwen was introduced in years after Spider-Man 2 came out. Like Spider-Man was kind of the only option. Maybe they would introduce Jessica Drew or Silk or someone like that. Like seriously, it's Pete and he's on his own. In
Right.
the MCU, someone else actually can do the job.
Right.
And a lot of Homecoming and Far From Home is Peter learning to say, yes, they can, but they shouldn't. I should do the job anyway, even though somebody else can.
Right.
But in these movies, like, if Peter just says no, then thousands of people die.
Right. And that's a
And
very interesting, especially in comparison to the MCU, where superheroes are a dime a dozen, especially when mutants are introduced, which they tried doing with the Inhumans, didn't really work out. That show was not good at all. I got through 2 episodes, and a Marvel fan, was like, no, this is not good. But like in these movies, like Peter is the only superhero. And in turn, I guess you can say that makes him responsible for the villains that are created. Like Green Goblin, sure, it wasn't his doing, but he had a part not in his creation, but in the Green Goblin like going insane because like he beat the Green Goblin, and I guarantee you, if he hadn't have stepped in and the Goblin had killed the board members and got away, that might have been it. It might not have escalated, but because Peter was there, it escalated because now the Goblin wanted to kill Spider-Man, so that put Mary Jane's life in danger because he just took Mary Jane. And that's the thing in these movies. Real quick, the villains, even without knowing the superhero's identity, just ends up snatching their loved ones somehow. Like the Goblin didn't know that Mary Jane and Spider-Man were like very similar, although close to the end of the film he did. But like just takes her. In Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock just grabs Aunt May off the ground, doesn't even know Peter and Spider-Man knows Aunt May at all. So it's weird that like villains who don't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man just end up taking all of Peter's loved ones because it's some sort of cosmic karma that Peter being Spider-Man brings to the people around him, even if no one knows his secret identity. And with secret
so,
identities, we have that train
right.
scene, but we'll get to that in a second. What were you
Yeah,
saying?
so real quick, on that topic, it feels to me like the basic plot of a Spider-Man movie is punish Peter for doing good. It feels to me like the basic plot of a Spider-Man movie is the universe is trying to tell Peter a lesson and he refuses to listen. That lesson being stop. Hang up the suit. We don't want you. Is what the universe keeps trying to tell Peter.
Right.
That if you just hang up the suit, everything would be better. Like seriously, there are so many things in these movies that like Peter trying to do good actively makes things worse.
Right.
Spider-Man 2 has less of that than the first one, but like
Right. Because if Peter was
ooh,
Because like if
Camp
Peter
assumed.
wasn't Spider-Man and they weren't at the demonstration, New York would have been completely destroyed by Doc Ock's first son.
Yeah,
So in the beginning, like
yeah,
that whole scenario, none of that was Peter's fault. Even in the end, like none of that was Peter's fault. The all of Spider-Man 2, like the main conflict with Doc Ock, that was all reactionary on Peter's part. Even all the subplots and stuff, with him hanging up the cowl, he was on the defense. He didn't cause this villain. He's not the reason this villain's going on a rampage. He's just this basically was Harry's fault. This was Harry's doing, and I think this was the beginning of Harry's downward arc by supplying what was needed for the son going completely berserk, and then Harry swearing revenge on Spider-Man because he touched him. Like this guy is he is so blinded by rage that he can't even thank Spider-Man for saving him. Um, but then you've got Doc Ock. He goes to the river, and he very fortunate that he chose the river to make his second son. Because if he had chose, I don't know, Central Park, then this whole thing would have like the whole city would be gone. The whole world would be gone. But it was very fortunate that he chose that old abandoned clock cathedral thing in the river. And Peter, the entire movie was just playing catch up to Doc Ock. He was playing reactionary, which is something I like. If we're being 100% honest, I don't like when the heroes make their villains. I want to see. I like seeing that. Don't get me wrong, but I want to see heroes fighting against villains that they had no control over creating and are only playing reactionary because that can cause for some really interesting stories.
yeah, yeah. I feel like what these movies are is that Peter really needs to take care of himself while he's being Spider-Man.
Right.
That is not the message that I get from it, but I think that's what these movies are trying to say.
Right.
The message that I get from it is make yourself miserable, drive yourself into the ground, overwork yourself, and destroy your life because if you don't, the entire world will end.
Right. And
And
I see it. I see
coming
it.
from like my perspective, my experience, that is just like an incredibly toxic message for me personally. I'm not saying the movie shouldn't have that message. I'm saying that's the message that I get and that I need to not have that message. Somebody else probably needs that message. There's probably somebody out there who's like, I am burnt out. I'm scared that I should stop doing this thing and realizes no, this thing is important. But like, dude, Spider-Man is saving a planet. If he didn't stop Doc Ock, Thing probably would have become an actual miniature sun and destroyed not just New York City but the entire planet.
Oh, it did. It did. Once the
You're
thing
trying
became
to
self-sustaining, it literally was like its own star. If Peter hadn't have stopped it, it would have gotten bigger. But he actually made the star because he was able to get to the self-containing part. Anyway, that's neither here nor
whereas
there.
whereas
Very
other
semantic.
people the stakes are like not nearly as big as the entire planet gets destroyed. Maybe you can take a little time for yourself.
Right. I mean, Tony
Maybe
Stark would beg to differ on more than one occasion.
yeah, Tony Stark begs to differ because every time Tony tries to do something good, it becomes worse.
And then
If Tony
Peter
would
has to
just
clean up
sit
his
back
mess.
and stop doing things, if Tony would just retire, things would be better.
I mean, Tony did
Spider-Man just
retire.
3 times.
I'm talking in Endgame. He did retire.
I know.
It
Twice. He
just
retired twice. Once at the end of Iron Man 3, and once at the end of Age of Ultron.
yeah, and then technically he retired 3 times. It's just one was him retiring from life,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
Grandmaster.
Um,
You have been
and oh
pardoned
yay! From
from
now on, the
life.
world is going to be a slightly better place
Right.
because Tony is not in it. But with
Uh,
Peter, like every time he tries to do good, the universe just punishes him for it and replies, "No, stop doing good. Focus on your private life. Focus focus on yourself, focus on focus on your relationship with Mary Jane, and on paying your rent, and on making sure your aunt's house doesn't get foreclosed, and on getting your best friend to not hate you anymore. And he finally does. And suddenly the universe is perfect
I
for him.
wouldn't.
His world is perfect at the expense of, all of New York City. And it's just like, what do you want him to do? And he has a point when he said, am I not supposed to have what I want? Am I not supposed to be happy? Because, like, the universe punishes him if he does, but if he doesn't, then the universe punishes everybody else.
Right.
Oh my gosh, Peter Parker is his own trolley problem.
Now, I
He
kind of
can
got a
pull the lever
different.
and throw himself under the trolley, or that's not a trolley problem. That's just self-sacrifice.
Right.
And it's like, I think the message this movie wants to communicate is take care of yourself while you do the important thing. Find balance. And I'm like, he tried for the first 30 minutes of the movie and couldn't. Partly because,
Right.
PTSD. Lots of PTSD.
Now, I got a different message from this movie, to be honest. I got the message of, like
Hey, I'm
Peter.
glad. Nobody's the message that I got from this movie.
Well, I can see where you got got the message you got from, and it's a completely valid interpretation of the movie. I just got a slightly different one in the sense of, like, if Peter had never been bitten by the spider, Doc Ock would still have tried to make the sun, and the world would have been destroyed. But because Peter was given these gifts from the universe, was given this responsibility, he has to act on it. Not because, like, he made the problem, but because he's the solution to an inevitable problem. Because, like, if we could do this in real life, someone would make a sun in a New York City penthouse laboratory, and we don't have superheroes to help us fix the problem. So he was an inevitable solution to an inevitable problem, and the theme that I got away from it from this whole thing was balance. Because when Peter got what he wanted, in the end he wasn't happy. Because what he thought he wanted was not what he actually wanted. From everything that I'm seeing, he enjoys being Spider-Man, but wishes that he didn't have to be it all the time, which makes sense. I love being a YouTuber. I don't want to do it all the time. Um, and so
And you don't have to.
I know. It's just if I want to get a video
It,
out every other day, I have to work pretty much every day on
you are
editing and
not.
filming, and it's fun. Anyway, back to Spider-Man though. Um, what I got from this was the world needs Spider-Man. So you cannot hang up the mask completely, but don't let Spider-Man overtake who you are. Do your studies, get the good grades, get the girl. You can have the girl. Just because you're Spider-Man doesn't mean you can't have the girl. But you can't do one or the other. There's a middle ground. You have to find that middle ground. There will always be a middle ground no matter what you're doing that you can achieve. It means doing less of both of these things, but you'll be happier for it in the long run. It might not seem
I
like it, but deep down, I guarantee you, Peter is happier being both Spider Man and Peter Parker equal amounts of the time, rather than Spider Man 99% of the time and Peter 1. Because, like, for it.
Life is not just about doing one thing all the time and throwing yourself into it at the expense of everything else.
Exactly. That's called grind. And there's a reason that when you grind for something, by the time that project is over, you never want to look at it again.
There's also a reason why in the comics, when Peter grows up, he is an angry, bitter old man.
Yeah, because from what I've seen, Peter never learns the lesson in the comics. And I think
Part
no
of that
one.
reason. Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh. And I think that's going to be a big part of No Way Home. Because if, and this is a big if Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is in this movie, I think one of the lessons he's going to depart on Tom is going to be don't be Spider-Man 100% of the time. Find that balance. You can find it. yes, a world-ending event's going to happen, and when that comes, you're going to have to put a lot of your focus on that. But after that's done, you don't have to be Spider-Man all the time. Think of it as a normal job. 8 hours a day. After that, go home. Spend it with your family. Or 4 hours a day, go home. You're not the only superhero in New York. And
Yeah, it is going to be really weird to see Tom and Andrew in a world where there are other superheroes, and they're like, "I'm not the only one." Someone,
yes.
um,
Man, I'm getting shivers.
yeah,
Um,
honestly, like, I'm sorry. Part of it is just that the message that I personally tend to get from this movie is really frustrating because, like,
right, I get you.
find balance. The universe starts throwing the need to be Spider-Man at him at the expense of everything else. Like, this is more a thing in Far From Home. Every time that he tries to spend time with his friends or tries to spend time with MJ, the universe throws a big problem at him that he has to solve right now and has to ditch all of his friends, and he's like, and I'm like, he, like, sure, in theory that's an option, but in execution, the universe keeps throwing stuff at him that keeps getting in the way of everything. He can either choose to have friends or choose to be Spider-Man because timing is terrible in these movies.
Right.
Um,
Now, my
sure, that's
question
mostly
though.
a thing in Far From Home, but it is still a thing in Spider-Man 2.
Right. My question though, especially when it comes to the MCU, there are world-ending events like every year. It's like an annual thing in the MCU. There are massive destruction events pretty much every other day. So, MCU alone is much more understandable that Peter will take off the mask and then have to put it right back on for some big threat because of how often it occurs. The original three Spider-Man, it's either stupid coincidence or cosmic karma, and I'm leaning toward the cosmic karma. But at the same time, especially with what I've been saying with Doc Ock, Peter was a necessary solution for an inevitable problem. But I hope we see that more in Spider Man 3. I don't think we will, though, just based on the villains. I think the villains are going to be personal struggles, specifically, and struggles like specific like attacks or events directed around Peter, which I like seeing that, but as I've said, at the same time, I want to see him react to non-personal threats like Doc Ock, who was just trying to make renewable energy and it went wrong. It was an inevitability. If Peter wasn't there, he still would have made that miscalculation. The sun still would have gone out of control. It still would have killed his wife and fused the inhibitor and fried the inhibitor chip, but it also would have destroyed the city. And so Peter being there was he had to be. There was no other option because there's nobody else that could have saved the world. So in that regard, it makes a lot of sense. Is the whole like I am destined to do this and it's hurting, but at the same time, sometimes personal pain is necessary for the future. But I don't want to sound like a doomsayer, I guess, like especially a personal doomsayer. Um, but I don't know. That's just what I got from it. Um, anyway, you want to talk about Doc Ock's arms and how cool they look?
Yes, Doc Ock's arms look awesome. I mentioned in the previous episode that like wake up for the first time in the hospital. Like
Oh
Sam
my
Raimi just goes
gosh.
full on back to his horror roots.
That that scene where the lady got drug across the floor and was like peeling up the floor tiles. Like I know how that was done. It was just like they put like a layer of wax over top of the floor, and what you saw peeling up was the wax from the fingers. But that gave me goosebumps because that, like, whenever I like accidentally like scrape my fingernails across like metal or something, and you get that weird feeling in your fingers, it like I stop whatever I'm doing and I'm just like, because it's
And
such a weird feeling.
that scene is why um
Then there was a scene later on with Harry and Doc Ock where you knew like it was set up to be a jump scare by one of the tentacles, but it still got me. Like I'm sitting here, I've got my candle lit over here, my lights are off, I'm watching, and then that ominous music plays, and I'm like, that's gonna be a jump scare. I'm ready. I'm not gonna jump. Ah! It it's very. It was a very good scene. I like the whole thing between Doc Ock and Harry.
jumping back to the theme.
Okay.
It doesn't partly because it doesn't make me happy to talk about, so it probably doesn't make anybody else happy to talk about for to hear me talk about. Every single time that I watch a superhero movie these days, I feel like I'm getting the same message. To go back to being a chosen one, to go save the world. Every single time I think, oh, you were wrong. I wasn't the chosen one. I'm not the person who's supposed to save the world. There are other people who are, and it's not me. Honestly, it makes it really hard for me to watch any superhero movie these days.
Right.
To me, every single superhero movie has the same message as Spider-Man 2. At least that's the message that I get out of it. Every single one.
Here's my
Just as
question.
Spider-Man 2 puts it way more front and center, and it's like blaring at you, go destroy your entire life if you have to in order to do what's right. And I'm like, no, that's what they said was right.
Right.
I refuse to believe there are things that are right for me to do, and those things I'm willing to find balance in and to put priority on and to take care of myself while I do them. But if I can't take care of myself while I do them, then maybe I'm not supposed to do them by myself. If I can't take care of myself while I do it, maybe it's not supposed to be a one-man job. I'm sorry to be so frustrated about this and to be so angry on the
Oh, it's
air.
all
It's just
good.
like every single superhero movie for a year. Like there are a lot of superhero movies, not just today, not just the ones that are coming out, but like I've been watching old superhero movies too. Like all of them have the same feeling, especially like Eternals.
I was
Like
actually about
they
to bring that
go
up.
live normal, basic lives. Fastus gets a family and actively chooses to not go do the thing because he's realized this isn't good. And then goes and does the thing anyway. I'm
No,
like, is the universe trying to tell me to go do the thing? Is this just like my own subconscious getting this message out of it? Am I just feeling guilty for forsaking toxic beliefs? I don't know.
I don't think you're guilty. I don't think you should be at least. And this is specifically a message for you. Um, Today, live how you want. Eventually, and if you are what everyone says you are, you will know. If you live today like you want, and you live it according to God's plan, of course, when the time comes that it is time that you step into your role, you will not only be ready, but you will be willing. And that's like in Eternals, with Fastos going to fight to fight Tiamat, to end end the emergence. You said that it was bad, it was wrong of him, or it wasn't good for him to leave. I thought of it completely differently. I thought he didn't want to leave because he didn't want to forsake his family, but his husband knew that not only was it his mission and his duty, that if he didn't do it, then he would be leaving all of the rest of his family down. And it was the right thing to do. And he had the support of his family for it. And I think that's a very interesting lesson is live today the way you want. And when the time comes that you have to step into a specific role, you will be ready and willing no matter the costs. Because I know I don't want to be in the military, but if I'm called by like if that urge is put on my heart one day, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that my destiny is to fight in the military, I will go and enlist that day. Because at that point, I will have lived every day the way I wanted to, and know that not only is this right, but it is what I'm supposed to do. And even if I don't want to do it, I'll be ready. And so that's not going to work for everybody, but I hope you can find some solace in knowing that you don't have to worry about the future. Let the future happen. The present is a present, and that's the only one we're going to get. The future is yet to come. It might not even happen. Who knows? Maybe it was wrong. Maybe they were right. But who are we to say whether or not something can happen? Because in the end, we are human. We don't get to pick what we are. Well, we do. We get to pick what we are. But in the end, what we are, like, I don't want to say doesn't matter. But once we die, it doesn't. Because we can't take it with us. So live and be who you want to be. Of course, if you believe in like a God, in accordance to your God. And let the future play out the way that it plays out. I don't know if that made any sense. I could have been rambling. I could have made things 100 times worse.
Don't
Um,
worry. It's just I don't know. This is just something that I've been like dealing with and struggling with recently, and it's just really hard to watch any superhero movie at all. Like I would love to see one superhero movie where it's where the superhero realizes this is not working. It's making me miserable. It's making everybody else's lives worse. I'm done. They take a break and they don't go back
I don't
because
think.
they don't have to.
Right.
Most of the time, they don't have to. Or maybe where they say, everyone was wrong about this hero thing. It wasn't supposed to be a hero. It was just supposed to be a guy. And honestly, that's like my main concern is that like everybody told me this is what you're supposed to be, and I'm like, no, that's not what I was supposed to be. That was never what I was supposed to be. That's just what everybody tried to force me into becoming.
Right.
That's why superhero media is so hard for me. This is also part of why I love Gwenpool, because she's not trying to save anybody. She's just trying to not die.
Right.
And part of why I
Um,
love Squirrel Girl, because she actually does save people. She actually makes things better. Instead of Spider-Man, where like it makes things worse. Not as much with like the sun. Sure, if he hadn't been there for the sun, everything would be worse. It's
right.
just like so many
It's either me
superheroes
or the sun.
like so many superheroes just make everything worse. I'm like, then stop. I know that is an extremely unpopular thing to say, because the entire point of superhero media is that they don't stop. I just wish one time that it would be morally acceptable that I would not be actively villainized on screen.
Right. And
I wish
honestly,
one time that it wouldn't be a movie saying you made a mistake for throwing away a toxic narrative that everybody else told you about yourself, and instead and stop saying you are the bad guy for doing this. Like my perspective of maybe I'm not supposed to be the hero. Maybe everyone just told me I was supposed to be a hero. My perspective every single time is turning to the villain. Not the villain, but a villain. And it's
right.
just it makes me think maybe I should go back to doing the thing that makes me absolutely miserable that everybody else told me that I should do, even though it's not right for me. It's just exhausting.
I get that. I do. Not to the extent that
I
you've
know I'm kind of
lived.
just spending this entire podcast episode complaining. There's a
Dude, it's
reason why
okay.
after the movie I was like, I have nothing to say.
Dude, it's
Nothing.
okay.
Because the only thing that I can say is all of this garbage of working out my personal issues in public.
Well, hey, it's all good. This right here, this podcast, it's safe. We can talk about whatever we want to talk about. We can let it all out. It's like think of it like therapy. Although I'm not a licensed therapist, I'm just a probably equally as depressed young adult guy still living at home with his parents. Um, but yeah, it's something that everyone has to deal with. Some people more than others. Some especially more than others. Um, but in the end of the day, it all comes down to the individual person. Like I can't tell you what to do because I'm not you. I know nothing about what you've been through. I can give you my thoughts. I can give you my opinions. You can take them. You cannot take them. It's completely up to you. And from there, it's between you and God. It's between you and the big man. And prayer, I
The
found,
other
is. Go ahead.
the other big issue I have with usual with saying these kinds of things in public is that I'm scared that it sounds like I'm saying superhero movies are bad.
Oh, no, no,
I'm
absolutely
trying to
not.
make sure to phrase it as I have a hard time watching these things. Not that
Right,
they are bad, not that they are morally bad, and I also don't want to make it sound like, hey, I want one movie to validate my mistakes. I'm trying to say, no, it wasn't a mistake. Stop saying it was.
right,
Then every time it happens, I'm like, wait, was it a mistake? If every single movie of these says that it was a mistake, maybe I should listen? I don't know. I don't know. And I'm not willing to find out right now.
right,
I need the answer to be, oh, be happy, or there is no point in you doing the work anyway.
right.
And is not happy. What is the point of him saving New York? I'm not saying that one person's happiness is more important than 10,000 lives. I'm saying that if he's not happy, he's gonna hate New York. I'm sorry, it's New York. Most people who live in New York hate New York.
But don't come in there and say that you hate New York if you're an outsider, because then you get smacked with a crowbar.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not saying that I hate New York. I'm saying that Peter needs to love New York, or he will not be a good hero for New York because he's
Right,
not driven by love. He's driven by guilt.
right,
So much guilt. His standard patrol in the comics is to stop by the place where he failed to save Gwen Stacy, stop by the place where he failed to save Gwen Stacy's dad, and stop by the place where he failed to save Uncle Ben. Because he's trying to remind himself why he's a hero, and I'm like, if that's the reason why you're a hero, go to therapy. Go be a hero because you love these people, not because you feel guilty or because you're afraid that you're gonna fail again.
I don't. So, and then this is gonna be another like different take. I've always thought of it as like he's a hero because he doesn't want other A, because he doesn't want other people to go through what he went through, but B, because he loves the city so much that he's willing to give up everything for them. And I've always thought of it
I,
that way. And
I love that.
it could just
I
be
have no
because I've always wanted to look at it in that way rather than looking at it the way that it's intended. But at the same time, I don't know. I like to try and find the good in things, even if I believe things can be bad. Stories can be bad, films can be bad, but I always try to find something good, even in a bad movie. That's why Transformers Revenge of the Fallen is my favorite of the Transformers films, even though I believe it's the worst film in the series.
Yeah, I would love to have that interpretation. I've never seen that interpretation actively supported in the text, whether it's the comics or the movies or the video games, but I have not seen all of the movies.
Right.
I have seen all the movies that people care about. I'm not, I have not seen the Tokusatsu Japanese Spider-Man movie. I've not seen the Amazing Spider-Man movie. I've never seen Three Death Adam or Italian Spider-Man. No one cares. If you haven't seen those, no one's going to be like, oh, you haven't seen every Spider-Man movie. I've seen all the
Right.
Spider-Man movies. I have not read every Spider-Man comic, not played every Spider-Man video game. It is possible that that idea of him loving the city so much that he's willing to sacrifice everything for it, it's possible that idea is in there. I haven't seen it in the text. I also haven't interpreted the text that way. It's possible it's in there. It's possible that I could have that interpretation. I just haven't.
Right.
Um,
I
and
mean, there's also the adrenaline of swinging through New York City. So there is that.
yeah, honestly, like that's the reason why I love Spider-Man because web slinging looks awesome,
Oh, it
and
looks.
every single Spider-Man movie makes web slinging look so cool. Like, it looks so cool. Like the Insomniac PS4 game looks so cool when he web slings.
And then the Avengers added Spider-Man to their roster in the Avengers game, and his web slinging looks like garbage. Like Fortnite did a better job with web slinging than the Avengers game did. Because for some reason, when you shoot a web, it stops all of your momentum in the game, and you start another arc. Stop. New arc. There's no flow. There's no momentum. Fortnite, literally Fortnite, introduced Spider-Man at one point, and his web swinging is 10 times better than the freaking than Square Enix ever could have done.
I haven't played the Avengers game.
Oh,
I
no,
am
I
not a
haven't
game.
either, but I've seen the videos of it. It's not good. The web swinging, at least. The story is all right, at least from what I've seen. It's not groundbreaking. They introduced MODOK in it, which did you hear the news that just came out the other day? This is off Spider-Man topic, but did you hear the news for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania?
You've got to get. No, I have not.
MODOK is apparently confirmed for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And if that's the case, then I'm excited. I'm excited. I hope they cast because Bill Murray is going to be in the movie. I hope he plays MODOK because Bill Murray as just a floating head in a chair would be awesome.
I am not trying to go on some sort of holy crusade of checking the source on that.
Okay. What?
It's We Got This Covered.
Hmm. Does that mean it's
That's
a bad source? Is it a bad source? Is it a good source? I don't know.
okay. I'm going to try to be as polite as I possibly can about this.
All right.
We Got This Covered has been accurate sometimes. No more
Okay.
than guesswork.
Gotcha.
If We Got This Covered said it, I assume that it is not accurate until someone else says it. We Got This Covered is not a reliable source.
Right.
There's the most polite way that I can possibly say it. On the other hand, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania wrapped a month ago. Wait, wrapped 2 weeks ago.
Gotcha.
They wrapped
Um.
on principal photography. It is possible that they will go back in reshoots and add MODOK. It is possible that We Got This Covered is accurate. And uh, and that they guessed correctly. That is possible.
Right.
I will give it
Now.
that. I doubt that they will add MODOK in reshoots. That doesn't seem like very in character for Marvel,
Well,
but it is
right.
a possibility.
However, and I'm comparing this right now to the Loki series because we got secret villain in Loki. We had no idea that Kang was going to be in that show until the end of the show came to our screen. Like, up until the very last episode when we saw him, we were all over the place. There was Mephisto talk, because of course there was. There was Kang talk, because of all the different rumors and stuff. Heck, there was even just, it was another Loki. Like, everyone thought, some people thought it was just going to be classic Loki, just like floating through the portal. Like, there was a piece of debris that kind of looked like Loki, and everyone jumped on. That's Loki. So we did get a secret villain in Loki. So it's very plausible that they were just able to keep MODOK's involvement quiet for the entire duration of filming. I don't know how plausible it was, but it's possible. Now, we do have to remember, like, there was no talk of MODOK in this movie until that article was released. So either they pulled it straight out of their butt, or they have some kind of knowledge, because no one was even guessing that MODOK would be in this film until that article was released. So unless they just pulled it out of nowhere, there has got to be some credit to whatever source they got that from.
So also I'm not finding any reliable sources, any reliable primary sources, things like Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline, the kind of things where you go there and you're like, okay, yes, if they said it is true, or they're going to doesn't issue retractions, and they don't have a great track record. That's about the most polite way I can say it without without accusing them of being bad people, because frankly, I don't know them well enough to say whether they're bad
Okay.
people or not. I have a lot of anger, like a lot of
Right.
anger. Fortunately, movies are helping me through that, and fortunately, wholesome film talk is helping me through that, because otherwise, I would not be in a good place.
Right. So I am on. Uh, this is the so I'm on the Disney Insider, or the Diz Insider, or the Insider, or something. I think it's the Insider. The Dis Insider. Okay, so like Disney Insider. They're reporting that rumors surfaced about a year ago that in the initial script for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which was like put forward by Paul Rudd, MODOK was in the script. Now this was before even Jonathan Majors was signed on to play Kang in the film, because this was like the first script of the film. And then, according to the direct, MODOK will have a major role in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. The site also dispelled rumors that Jim Carrey would be playing the character in multiple movies. Dang it! That would have been awesome! Jim Carrey is amazing. In the original report from 2020, it was said Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania would set up the Young Avengers, and that also appears to be the case now. We know Cassie Lang is back playing Catherine Newton. Just yesterday, it was reported that Haley Steinfeld was spotted on the set and will return as Kate Bishop. Oh, so there's reports that Haley Steinfeld was on the set for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and could be returning as Kate Bishop in the movie, which would be interesting.
Okay, so I'm trying to not be a jerk as I say this. Quick 101 for records to people making stuff up and passing it off as news.
Oh, I completely get that.
Just like quick guide for anybody out there. First, it must either be from Variety, Deadline, The Hollywood Reporter, with a decision maker on the project, or it must link back to one of those.
Right.
For example, if Kevin Feige gave a quote that Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, or Peyton Reed gave a quote saying MODOK will be in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and they quoted that quote and said, okay, so it's in this podcast episode where they were interviewing Peyton Reed. If, however, Paul Rudd said it, he has knowledge, but he doesn't have authority. He can't make that decision. Number two, We Got This Covered is specifically not a reliable source. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk about We Got This Covered, just like they don't have a great track record. And thing number three, if it uses the word rumor or reportedly in the headline, that's not news.
Right. Although
you are a reporter. You are the one reporting it. You can just say he's appearing instead of saying reportedly appearing. And rumors are not news any more than like a 6-year-old saying, "Oh, I heard that Jessica kissed Brent." No, that's not news. That's gossip. There's a difference. Rumors are not news. It's news if it's confirmation from a decision maker.
Right. Now, there is definitely a lot of like evidence going against not like I'm not talking like in this case. There's a lot of evidence going against the whole rumor thing. Like in what was it? Avengers Endgame, there were rumors going around that Tony Stark was going to be playing Tony Stark, Kang the Conqueror, Iron Lad, and Eternity for some reason. And like four people that I know believed that crap because apparently there was a script leak. Come to find out, it was a fan made script that they passed off, and they said reportedly got the script for Endgame, which was fun because they tried to convince me that Eternity was going to be in it, and I was hyped. But then on the other side, look at No Way Home. It's all but confirmed at this point that we're going to see the other two Spider-Man because of especially that Brazilian trailer, but it's still in a reported phase. So it could possibly not happen. That could have been Doc Ock and Venom. I would say could be in the movie. However, even with all like the rumors and stuff, and everyone denying that they're in the film, at this point, all signs are leading, or most signs at least, are leading to Toby and Andrew. So, rumors and reports can end up being true. Not all the time, not even 90% of the time, but there is precedence for just every now and then. So that I do want to put that out there. However,
Absolutely.
I agree. Do not believe everything that says reported. Make sure you do your research. Do all the fact checking you can on anything, not just movies, but anything ever. Don't just listen to one article, or don't just like listen to people say stuff. Find sources. Go back because even like the big news sites can make something up and pass it off as their as real. Always find the source. Fact check everything you read because there are easy ways to deceive you just in print media in general. Because someone can print this happened with no rumor in the title, and then like at the bottom of the very bottom of the article, there can be a little panel that says something like these are all just rumors, or they could just not say that. So always do your research. That's something that I've always lived by. Even
Two
when
other
like
things
I just throw out rumors.
two other things that are very important to think of while you're fact checking your film news. If there is a question mark in the headline,
It's probably fake.
that's not news. News doesn't need question mark. Raising it as will MODOK appear in Quantumania or MODOK slated to appear in Quantumania. There's a difference between those two
Right.
headlines. The second one is news. The first one is not. Um, and the other one is I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of polite ways to say this
Dude, be as
because I
brash
don't
as you
know these
can be.
people.
Like you be as brash as you need to be. I know I am.
I don't know these people. I don't know their hearts. I don't know their intentions. I am simply going to say that is not news. Don't treat it as such. The
Right.
last thing is um, an early idea in the script, a piece of concept art, something that they were thinking of doing, is not the same as a confirmation. I have a friend who was like, "Hey, I want to show you this piece of concept art from Spider-Man: No Way Home," and I was like, "I'd rather not see it." First, because I wanted to avoid spoilers, but second, because concept art is not say this is what we are going to do. The point of concept art is to see how it would look to figure out if you're going to do it or not.
Right.
The point of drafts is to throw away old stuff. The point of like rewrites is to say we're not going to do that. Like just because something was in an early script does not mean that it's going to be in the finished film. Stuff being in early versions, stuff being in ideas, stuff they were thinking of doing is not the same as a confirmation. Just
Right.
like if it is a confirmation, it will be very very obvious about it being a confirmation. It'll be like um Feige now is blank. It'll be in a press release from Marvel Studios. It'll be that kind of stuff.
Right.
It will not say the word tease because doesn't have to use the word tease because they'll tease it. News
Right.
doesn't get teased, news gets announced.
Oh yeah,
There.
definitely.
There's my guide to figuring out if something is film news or not. There's one thing that is film news, in my opinion. Everything else is not.
Right.
This is, to me, this is the only thing that I care about when it comes to film news, and everything else, to me, is not film news. Now, that is just my perspective, my philosophy, and my definition.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh,
What
it's
else do
all
we
good.
want to talk about with Spider-Man 2?
Um,
You mentioned that
well,
you want to talk about the secret identity with the train scene.
oh, that's right. I forgot. I'd forgotten that we were talking about Spider-Man 2. For being honest, like we talked. Like most of this was talking about like that the philosophy of the of that one particular philosophy, and then we started talking about fake news. Um, which yeah. Oh, the train scene. I hadn't seen the train scene before, and that whole section was like the fight on top of the train, then Peter stopping the train. That was all exhilarating and whatnot. And then when he like, oh, I just hit my mic. Um, when he like went to he stopped the train and he had to take his mask off because it was damaged, and all like the people in the train catch him and bring him in and lay him on the ground, and the one guy's like, he's just a kid. He's like no older than my son. That particular scene right there really hits home like the fact that Spider-Man Peter Parker is just a kid. These New Yorkers don't know that. And to see a New Yorker be like, my life was saved by a child, somebody who shouldn't be in this line of work, it's really touching. Because this means Peter is finally getting some recognition for what he does and how dangerous his line of work is. And then the kids coming in and handing him his mask and be like, "We won't tell nobody." Oh, that just choked me up, man. I I wasn't I wasn't crying, but like I was leaking a little bit. It was a really touching scene right there.
I'm glad you connected to it so much. Why do you think you connected to that?
I don't know. It's just a very touching scene cuz especially knowing that like Peter, knowing who Peter is and seeing the character as like seeing being able to know that Peter is a kid and finally seeing that he gets some recognition for what he does. It didn't touch me on a personal level because I never experienced something like that, but on a connection to the character. And this is what I'm always talking about when I say when a character is written well, even if you are nothing like that character, you will connect to them. Because when a character is written well and you know their motivations, you can connect to a character you would never connect to regularly. Because you understand their struggles, because not only have you been shown them, they've been explained to you. Not through like heavy exposition, but through the passing of time and proper filmmaking. And that's why to me, the best films are normally the ones that are the most emotional to me. Not because I know what the characters go through, but because the film is able to make me care enough about them to cry or to tear up when good things happen or when touching moments happen.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that. I could absolutely see that.
All right.
Is there anything else that you want to discuss during
No, I think I th-
for
I think we're at the end of what I want to talk about for Spider-Man 2. I don't remember all of it. The cinematography, like just basic stuff here. Uh, the special effects, just like the first one, they're really good for their time in comparison to today. Mm-mm. Like, go ahead.
honestly, I think well,
Well, yeah, like for 2004, they were really good. For 2021, they're not the greatest. They're fine. They're good. They're good. They're good. But they're not. top notch, is what I'm saying. Because you can tell where the special effects are, but they're still passable. None of it took me out of the film. Action scenes were good. They're awesome. They're not just good. They were intense. I had fun with them. The theme, as we've talked about, I found to be very strong.
Oh yeah,
Aunt May,
absolutely. This
right,
film is really tied together with a thematic through line rather than a narrative through line.
right,
It is more a film about theme than a film about plot.
and I think it hit its theme pretty well. I know there's gonna be like some back and forth about the theme, and I don't want to open that can of worms again. At least not right now, because we've already talked about it. It's pushed aside for now. I think the characters were written well. Um, I still think Mary Jane was a terrible person for what she did to that poor astronaut, even though he is J. Jonah Jameson's son, and he himself is not the greatest person. But we love J. Jonah Jameson because of his flaws, not in spite of them. Um,
Speaking of
oh,
which, this movie has perhaps the most iconic moments of J. Jonah Jameson.
yes.
Like, if you
Oh,
were to just
that
like
laugh.
see J.K. Simmons playing J. Jonah Jameson, out of the four movies that he's appeared in so far as J. Jonah Jameson, this one is the best one. This one is the one that will get you the most the most screen time of him being the most Jameson. It's also where almost every uh it's also where almost every J. Jonah Jameson meme comes from. Meme, the he was a hero, I just couldn't see it, the I want pictures of Spider-Man, like the
Oh,
I
what was
want Spider-Man, where he's looking up into the sky.
right?
Curse you, Perry the Platypus! Like, great angle, great performance. Like, it
Yeah.
really captured the feeling of that line. Like, this is definitely the most J. Jonah Jameson movie out of the franchise.
And then there was the one exchange where Peter Jameson offered Peter $100 for a picture, and Peter, finally standing up for himself, looked at Jameson and he's like 300, and Jameson's like, "What are you, insane? Done." And it perfectly encapsulates the fact that J. Jonah Jameson is a lunatic, but he is an amazing lunatic, and we love him for it. Like, if he were anybody else, he'd probably be in the loony bin right now. He'd be in an insane asylum. But
Or he would be CEO of a disreputable news source. One of the two. Well,
oh
as
yeah,
we're in
that's
Tijuana.
right. Oh, this this film also touches on the concept of fake news almost a decade and a half before it became relevant.
Let's be honest, it was always relevant. It's just
It's gotten
not
more
always called.
relevant. But it's like it's like I can't speak. It's bringing awareness to the fact that like news articles and like news publications focus more, most of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them focus more on the money than actually reporting the news. They focus more on what will catch a reader's eye than actually telling the truth. And that's where I think a lot of modern day news companies fail at, because not only do they want to try and entice the viewers to come in, many times they'll publish openly false information, and then, and I'm not saying like every news source does this all the time, but especially today we're finding a lot of publications do this. They'll publish openly false information to get all the clicks in, they get all the money, all the views, and then when they're finally found out, they post a retraction, but by that point, they've made all their money. They've made all the clicks. Everybody who would want to see the article's gone, and that retraction isn't going to see the light of day. It's not going to see anywhere near the number of people that saw the original article that was full of fake news and misinformation. And this happens on both sides of the aisle. I'm not pointing out any particular party. This happens, everybody does it. Everywhere. And it's always been like this. But now we're finally seeing it like realized and brought to the forefront because of movies like this. And even in 2004, it wasn't really talked about in the way that it is today.
On the topic of it's always been like this, yeah, back in the 1800s, they called it yellow journalism.
And today we just call it lying.
Yeah. 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 Alrighty.
Well, I think that about does it. Oh, we never even talked about the creepy rent guy or his equally as creepy daughter.
Oh. Oh. I.
I forgot they were in this movie.
Okay.
Oh, we'll cover them in the next video because the next one is where we get the rent meme from the next movie.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. You'll get your rent when you hit this door.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well,
Alrighty.
ladies, oh, you had something else said?
Just gotta say, I look forward to the next one. Um,
All right.
go ahead with the outro.
Well, I'm looking forward to all the upcoming Spider-Man movies. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Socials all in the description like normal. We will see you guys tomorrow for Spider-Man 3. Take care.